So again, welcome to our Office 365 productivity overview today. Peter Carson is going to be our guest speaker. Peter is our president and owner of Envision IT. He's a Microsoft MVP and well known in the Microsoft community. We focus a lot on SharePoint as well, so certainly very well known in that community as well. And his information is up here. This presentation will be recorded today and the slides will be made available to you as well. And it looks like Peter is joining us right now.
Hey, Joe.
All right. Thank you, Peter.
Thanks for standing in for me there. A little confusion, had some grief with my desktop. I just switched to a new machine here, so I'm just getting things back up to where you were in the presentation. So thank you for the introduction there. Yeah, all my credentials and information will be in the deck here, and we will be sharing that up on the site. That was Joe Sagan on the line, our Director of Consulting Services. We've also got Peter McKenzie on the line, who's our VP of Sales and Marketing, and his contact information is here as well. Quick agenda of what we're going to be going over today. We'll start with a very brief overview of Envision IT. It won't take too long from that side of things. The main bulk of the session is going to be a productivity tour of Office 365. We're not going to go too deep into any one area. We're going to give you sort of a high-level look at each of the areas that make up Office 365. We often get asked about security and privacy concerns around keeping data in the cloud. So we'll talk about what Office 365 does from a security and privacy point of view, and some interesting new announcements around that. We'll talk about next steps in terms of how you would begin your journey on Office 365, and then some upcoming sessions that we have coming up next week and the week following. So a quick overview on Envision IT, who we are. We are Office 365 productivity consultants. We've been working in the SharePoint space for about 10 years or so now, and really branching out into the cloud as that's become more prevalent over the last couple of years. So we're a go-to partner from a SharePoint websites point of view, building intranets, extranets, and collaboration portals. We've got 24 years of experience. I mentioned the 10 years in SharePoint. We're a Microsoft Gold partner, and we've got multiple awards that we've won from different organizations, including Microsoft themselves. We mentioned the four main pillars that we focus on: the public websites, intranets, extranets, and collaboration portals. Drilling into those, some of the additional services that we have underneath those. If you're still running SharePoint on premises, we do have a SharePoint Farm Health Check. It's a good thing if you've been running SharePoint for a number of years in your organization, maybe haven't kept up to date on cumulative update, service packs, things like that. Just having a look and see what the state of that farm is. Coming out of that, there may be some upgrades, migrations, plans around that. Maybe if you're on an older version of SharePoint 2007 or 2010, you're looking to move to 2013. Or if you're attending today's session, I imagine you're interested in potentially moving up into Office 365. So obviously we have services around both Office 365 and Azure, which is the other half of the Microsoft cloud story. We do work with AODA compliance, particularly from a public websites point of view. That's from an accessibility perspective. Upgrades and migrations, I mentioned there. Training, we don't do technical training, but we do a lot of end-user training. So you've got plans to deploy and upgrade over a new portal on Office 365 from a change management, communications planning point of view, staff training perspective. How do you make sure that's a success? And training is a key part of that. So we have a suite of programs we've developed for both collaboration and web content management training in SharePoint, both on-premise and Office 365. It is a mobile world, so we do a lot of work from a mobile-first adaptive design perspective, whether that's from a public-facing site. That's been prevalent for a number of years now, but even now, bring your own device is becoming much more prevalent in a lot of organizations, and the expectation is that the collaboration portals, the internet portals, are adaptive as well. We provide support agreements. We can work with you to build out the solution architecture and workflows and forms in terms of building that out for you as well. So let's start with an introduction of what Office 365 is, and it's really a collection of a lot of different things. It's a suite of desktop, mobile, and browser-based productivity tools. So it includes what you traditionally think of as Office, being the Word, Excel, PowerPoint, rich clients that you install on your PC, but there's Mac versions of those, there's iOS, there's Android versions of those. So Microsoft's done a very good job, particularly over the last year, of broadening that support out. Not just from a device point of view, but from a browser point of view as well. No longer is it a pure Internet Explorer world out there. The dominant browser these days is Chrome, a lot of people using that from an internal point of view as well, Safari on Mac devices, iOS devices, and support for that is very prevalent across that. Microsoft recognizes that it's not a homogeneous world out there. They need to support not only their own products, but competitors' products within that ecosystem as well. But as well as those desktop tools, whether they're installed on your PC, your Mac, or your mobile device, it's also a rich suite of browser-based tools. And we'll go over these in detail, but the Exchange Online, Mail, Calendar, and People, OneDrive and Sites that are SharePoint, the Power BI, Delve, and Video, which are extensions on the SharePoint world, as well as their traditional Office client applications actually running in the browser, so being able to use things like Word and Excel and PowerPoint online if you don't have an installed version on the computer that you happen to be working on. So it is a pretty extensive suite of products and services. There's a number of ways to purchase Office 365. There's different plans. Now there's plans for education, for government, for nonprofit, for home use. What I've focused up on here is the Canadian pricing for the general business plan. So there are discounted plans for education, government, non-for-profit as well. But basically there's a couple of different groupings and packages within here. So the Office 365 Business Essentials on the left, that provides you the desktop licenses and email account. The Office 365 Business provides you the full online suite of SharePoint and Yammer, those different tools, and then the Office 365 Business Premium kind of combines those together to say we get the desktop clients and the full online suite as part of that. And those are intended for small and mid-market organizations. They go up to 300-person organizations. From there, you move into the enterprise plans, the E1, the E3, the Pro Plus. So the E1 is sort of the base online tools. The Pro Plus provides you email and the rich client licenses, so the Word, Excel, PowerPoint, things like that. And the E3, again, combines those together to give you the full desktop suite as well as the full online suite. And the nice thing about the licensing is when you license your Office desktop through these subscription plans, whether it's anything from the Business Essentials all the way up to the Enterprise E3, you're not licensing them for a single device. The intent is that each user is then permitted to install those Office tools on up to 5 different desktop devices. So they may have a desktop PC at the office, they may have a Surface Pro that they carry around with them, they may have a home PC, they'd be able to use 3 of their 5 licenses for those 3 devices. And likewise for mobile devices, they may have multiple mobile. Maybe they've got a smartphone as well as a tablet. They can install the iOS, the Android, the Windows Phone licenses for those products on up to 5 devices as well. So it's very flexible from that point of view. So a quick background on Office 365. It's been around for a number of years. It actually started as BPOS quite a number of years back and evolved into Office 365 a few years ago. And the first wave that we've seen to Office 365 has really been around email. Just economies of scale. The data centers that Microsoft builds are massive, and the economies, the cost savings that they can drive down through that, not just from a server and a hardware point of view, but even from an air conditioning and an energy consumption point of view, they're really driving that down. And there's no way that you can build the sort of infrastructure that Microsoft's providing and the reliability that they're providing for anywhere near the cost that Microsoft's selling that for. So they're passing those economies of scale down onto the client. So it really doesn't make sense to run your own Exchange server on premise anymore. It just clearly the economics are not there to do that. The other thing that's driving it now is, I mentioned the Office suite you can purchase through a number of those Office 365 licenses. It's actually cheaper to buy it that way through the subscription than actually buy a full desktop license for that. It gives you the flexibility to install it on multiple different devices and form factors, and you're paying on a monthly subscription fee rather than the capital cost for that software purchase. Now there's a number of other products in there as well: OneDrive, SharePoint, Office Graph, Search, Power BI. We're going to be getting into those as we go through our session. So Microsoft just had their Build and Ignite conferences. For those of you that followed things like the SharePoint conference, the Exchange conference in past, they've blended all those together into the Ignite conference. And the Build conference is really the technical developer conference corresponding to that. So those both happened back in the beginning of May, so about a month ago. They've announced a vast number of updates to the whole Office 365 suite through there. And it's continuing to evolve and change there. They actually publish a public roadmap of what things are going to be coming out when, from an Office 365 point of view, over the next 6 to 12 months, what that plan looks like. And certainly that's another advantage of being in the cloud, is that pace of change, that agility, the ability to bring out new features, bring out new products, is much more rapid in the cloud than it is on premises. We're not beholden to a 3-year release cycle with major versions coming out. Not to say that those aren't happening. One of the announcements at Ignite was SharePoint 2016 officially being announced, and some details of what's going to be in that. And really, a lot of what we're going to see in SharePoint 2016 is what we're already seeing in the cloud. And Microsoft has declared that they're building for the cloud first. You're going to see the innovation happening in the cloud first. And then some of that will come down on premises, but not all of it. Some of it will remain purely in the cloud. Things like Office Graph and Delve that we're going to talk more about are strictly cloud-based solutions. They will have connectors to bring in your SharePoint on-premises information, but if you want to fully leverage it, you do need to be up in the cloud as part of that. But there are hybrid options if there are privacy concerns around certain content. Maybe there's personal health information if you're a healthcare provider that you don't want to put up into the cloud, regardless of where that resides. You could certainly keep that on premises, but keep the bulk of your information up in the cloud and get the benefits of the economies of scale and the productivity enhancements through the cloud as part of that. So when you sign into Office 365 and you're looking at the browser-based apps, there's what's called an app launcher, or some people call it a waffle, which flies out to navigate through the different applications within Office 365. And this is what we're going to go through here today. We've got the mail, calendar, and people, which make up primarily what you would think of as your Outlook workloads. You've got your news feed or Yammer from a social point of view, OneDrive and Sites for keeping your information, your files and your documents. OneDrive is more personal. Sites are more from a collaboration and sharing point of view across your organization. We've got tasks that kind of cross the boundaries. They can live within SharePoint Sites or within your personal inbox as well. And then you get into some of the newer features, Power BI for doing data analytics and analysis, Delve for doing information discovery, and the Office 365 video portal for sharing videos within your organization. And as I mentioned, you've got the online versions of the rich client applications, Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and OneNote. OneNote's been around since, I believe, the Office 2003 days. It's really caught on in the last number of years. And if you're not using it, I would strongly encourage it. You don't actually need the current Office 365 licensing in order to pull down the latest version of OneNote. Microsoft actually made that particular product free for everybody. And it's a fantastic tool for sharing your notes, both yourself and with other team members. So let's drill a little deeper into the individual components within that. So we start with Exchange Online. This is where most people have started historically their journey into Office 365. They say, well, we've got an on-premises Exchange, or maybe we're using a competing mail server technology, Lotus Notes, or something like that needs to be retired and replaced. We want to move up into the cloud. So Microsoft basically hosts your email, your calendars, and your contacts in the web or in Outlook or on your mobile devices. Each user gets up to a 50 gig mailbox and has access to that on all those devices. Now, bear with me, I'm still getting things set up on a new machine here. Let me flip over here and jump into that particular session. I'm just going to pause my screen for a sec. Hang on. Okay. Just share my screen out again. So I'm in the process of signing in to Office 365 right now. I'm using a demo site that we've set up, and I'm using the cloud identity. We'll talk about the login process and the identity later in the session to sign into this particular account. So I can go ahead and sign in. I'll say say yes to save that password. I'm actually coming into the corporate intranet right now. So I'm going to come back to this in a minute. What I'm going to do is pull up that waffle that I was talking about here. We can see all the different applications, and I can come down into my mail through here. Now I wanted to show you some of the rich desktop integration. Because I've switched machines here, it's going to be a little more difficult to do some of that. You'll get a sense of how this works through here. So the Outlook experience, whether you're in the rich Outlook client or through the browser-based version, is very familiar and very similar. So as you move back and forth between those, it's quite consistent through that. So I've got access to my full inbox. I can flip over and go into my calendar through here as well. And calendars, of course, can be shared. So if you want to do group calendars, invite people to meetings and such, all that same functionality that you have if you're used to using that in Exchange obviously exists in Exchange Online as well. And then I've got my people section here where I can manage my contacts personally through here, whether that's corporate contacts or personal contacts. And you can see, we'll talk in a minute about some of the other tools like Skype for Business, how that presence and information comes in through here as well. I have the ability to not only send emails, but do instant messages through that as well. Let me come back over here. So Skype for Business, I'm actually going to open up my, oh, that's not the one I want. This machine actually hasn't been updated. It's still showing as Link, which is the previous name for Skype for Business. So here I've signed in as my Envision IT account. I can actually see my staff, their presence, and information through here. So I can see that, you know, Dinesh, Amanda, Erica, the green indicating online, the yellow indicating away from their system. So if I want to communicate with them, I have the ability to send emails to them, but I can also do instant messages right through here. Having actually prepped Dinesh for this, so let's see if he responds here. We are in the lunch hour. So we can get an instant message going back and forth. If I need to, I can switch that into a voice call or video call, or actually do a presentation through here. So we want to do desktop sharing. I could actually share my desktop out with Dinesh and collaborate back and forth through that. So it's a very powerful tool for running meetings, for connecting out quickly with people. So you have to kind of think about what's the best way to communicate with people. It depends on the situation. If I saw that Dinesh was yellow rather than green, my choice might be to send him an email rather than an instant message, because I'm not going to get that response back right away. I may pick up the phone and try and call him on his mobile number. I can pull that information up through here as well. So all that contact information is actually exposed through the Skype for Business client as well. Yammer is the enterprise social network. So for those of you that have followed the enterprise social story in SharePoint, it's been a little bit convoluted. There was a story on premises with SharePoint with news feeds and such. Microsoft purchased Yammer, though, about 2.5 years ago, I guess it was now. And they were the dominant enterprise social network. So what is that? It's not Facebook. It's the way for your enterprise to share knowledge and information back and forth. It's really about driving productivity through team collaboration and engaging your employees. And if you think about it, what you would send normally through an email distribution list, like a staff@company.com, is really something that you should be doing through Yammer. And the reason for that is it becomes much more open and collaborative conversation. It's not a point-to-point email conversation. In fact, people that maybe aren't even part of the organization, one of the big benefits that I see is the ability to go back into that conversation history in Yammer and pull up those threads and those information. So as people are knowledge sharing and peeking for tidbits of information back and forth through the team, all that gets recorded in Yammer and becomes part of the searchable history of the organization. So even though you may not have those notes in your inbox later because you weren't part of that conversation, it is exposed and available out there through there. So it really facilitates information discovery and engagement through your staff. OneDrive for Business So this is basically a personal SharePoint. So it's up to a terabyte of file storage for each user. In fact, I think they've taken that limit off now. I believe it's unlimited storage. And it allows you to sync those files across all your devices. So it's both a cloud-based storage, but it's also a sync client that you install either on your desktop or your mobile device. And basically, you can choose to sync some or all of your files onto your local device and have access to them offline. You can make edits to them through there. When you come back online, it'll sync those changes back up through you. You can obviously use search to go through and find your files, and it doesn't have to be just your personal files. You can actually share those files out with your colleagues and even with external users. So as external sharing is turned on, you can invite somebody external to the organization and share something with them through your OneDrive, through there, either a folder or file, depending on how broad you want that sharing to be. So this is really a replacement for the personal file shares that you traditionally would have had provisioned by IT on a network file share. So we quite often see people looking to just move those network file shares up into OneDrive. You may not want to automate that because there's historically often a lot of garbage on those file shares. You probably want people to manually do that themselves and pick and choose what they want to keep and bring that across to their OneDrive from there. The convenience here is those network file shares traditionally were only accessible from a desktop device connected to the corporate network. The OneDrive for Business obviously is available on the web, on any device, both mobile and desktop, PC or Mac. So it really provides that accessibility across a wide variety of devices and locations. SharePoint Online, being a SharePoint shop, this is obviously where a lot of our interest is, the ability to communicate and collaborate with your organization, whether that's from a formal corporate intranet that may be managed by communications or HR within your organization, or whether it's more informal team sites that you're spinning up for projects, for departments, to have for a working place from there. It can also encompass forms and workflows if there's defined processes that you want to manage through that. So let's take a minute now to flip over to the SharePoint Online experience here. So I come back to my waffle, go back to my site. Give that a second. So I can follow sites, and this is an easy way for me to bookmark and come back to those sites later. So I can see the top one here is the main Contoso home site. So this is basically the corporate intranet. So even though it's Office 365 and it's managed by Microsoft, it doesn't mean that you can't apply your own look and feel to that. And we're actually going to do a session the week after next on branding and navigation and the different approaches to do that. Obviously, Microsoft wants you to minimize your changes so that as they bring out new features, the chance of conflict and issues coming out of that are minimized. And I think they've done a good job here in terms of applying a theme and a brand to that. We've got the Contoso logo, some of the colors in there. We do have a main navigation that lets me navigate into the different areas from there. And we can see the content and information up from there. You can see the Yammer feed. We haven't wired this up on the demo site just yet. You can merge what's happening from an enterprise social point of view with your corporate intranet as well. And Yammer really gets its hooks in throughout the organization in a lot of different places. You can expose those social feeds throughout the different sites within there. So I can see, top-level communications from the president, from HR, the employee of the month. We've got videos available through here, and we'll talk more about Office 365 video and what can be done from that point of view, links to documents and such. So you've got the ability to richly control the content that comes out through that, or we can drill down into specific sites. Let's say I want to go down into the engineering site, but because I'm part of the engineering team. And we can apply different permissions in here to say, well, who should have access into here? We probably don't want everybody in the organization having the ability to update content in the engineering site. This is their working area. And they may not even want to allow other staff to even view some of the content that's in here. They may have private areas for projects that are still under wraps that they're not ready to share within the organization as a whole. And SharePoint allows you to share a lot of different content. It's not just about documents. We can see here we've got a team calendar for the engineering team. We've got upcoming engineering announcements, as well as general corporate announcements. We can have department level announcements through that as well. We can use things like cross-site publishing to actually surface those up in different areas. So maybe engineering wants some of their announcements to be just visible to the engineering team within the engineering site, and other major announcements maybe they want the entire company to be able to see and have those bubble up to the top level site. So there's ways we can do that. You can author the content in one place and have it surface up in multiple from there. We can come down into the different document libraries and such and see how the content is organized. We can apply metadata. We can organize it in different libraries, apply permissions and such through there. So it's very rich in terms of document management and record management in terms of what you can do within there. Oh, sorry, I've actually drilled down into a whole other site here. So you can create a hierarchy of project sites down the levels from there, spin those up, provide project summary here, and provide a spot to work on the documents through here. Now, as I work on those documents, I may or may not have the Office client installed. I may be working on a home computer that I haven't installed Office on yet. I actually have the choice here of actually looking at that either in Word Online or launching it into the full Reg client. So you can see here we've got preview panes. I can actually preview through that document before I open it up, say, is that the one that I actually want to work on, yes or no? If I do, then I can actually click into it, launch into the full Word Online. If I want to edit it, I have the choice of either editing that in the full Word or in the online version. Now, the online versions aren't fully as rich as the rich clients, but they really allow you to do the 90% of the work that you would ever want to do in Word, for example. You can do all of your formatting work, layout work through there. Some of the more obscure Word functions, they haven't exposed in the browser because people just don't use them that often. And if they really need them, then they can launch out to the full Word client from there. This is particularly nice too if you're going to be sharing these documents external to your organization. You may not know whether those people you're sharing with even have the Office clients. And they don't need to have them. They can simply use the online version. And those external users are free to share with, and it's free for them to use the online browser versions of the Office client through there. So it's great from that collaboration point of view, both internally and externally. Some of the other neat things is as I'm working through these documents, there may be multiple people working at the same time on the document. If I keep that document in SharePoint, I can actually have what's called co-authoring. So I can have multiple people open that Word document and editing it at the same time. It'll lock it down at the paragraph level, so if I'm working on one paragraph, somebody else can't work on that one, that they can work on other parts of the document from there. And you can actually see those changes through there. In Office 2013, you have to save to see the other person's change come through. In Office 2016, which has been announced and is actually available in general availability for preview mode, it actually does a live co-authoring. So you actually see the letters changing as the other person is typing in through that. So that's a really powerful feature from a collaboration point of view. In fact, we were using it on this presentation itself. We had a number of our staff, myself, Pete, Joe, who were all in the presentation at the same time. We were able to work on different slides simultaneously, and we're all saving it back into one place in SharePoint. And that's really the key message with SharePoint is one version of the truth. Don't keep multiple copies of the documents. Even OneDrive, don't overuse that and start pulling copies down into your personal OneDrive. If it is something that you're truly collaborating on, keeping it in a team site where multiple people have access to it just makes a lot more sense from that point of view. So there's a lot more we can go into from a SharePoint perspective, but we're going to keep this at a high level and browse through the different products from there. Now, there is the option to have a hybrid SharePoint. As I mentioned before, you may have certain confidential information you're not comfortable putting up into the cloud. You can connect your on-premises SharePoint with the online. And part of what we're going to be talking about in our session week after next with branding and navigation is how to do that in a consistent way. So it's almost transparent to users as they transition between the on-premise SharePoint and the Office 365 SharePoint. It feels like one site in one environment that they're going to. It's the same nav, it's the same branding across that. It's just that some of that content is kept in one side versus the other from there. And even things like search. Search is obviously a very important part of SharePoint. You want the ability to search through all of the content in there. They're actually going to be bringing out at the end of this calendar year, so about 6 months from now, the ability to, let's just try search for search. The ability to crawl both on-premise and cloud content and provide a unified search experience through here. You can see here my search results coming back. It's searching not only the titles and the metadata of the documents, but the full content of the documents themselves. And that same preview that we were seeing when we were looking at individual documents is also exposed in the search. We can see even deeper links within where it's found that text within the document. It'll provide live links to go to that particular spot in the document. And I can refine it based on what type of results am I looking for, who, what type of content, when was it created, etc. from there. So very powerful from that perspective. Next up is Power BI. Power BI standing for Business Intelligence, is about really providing rich analytics for both your data and external data. So it's the ability to connect to data that you have in Excel, and Excel is really a strong part of this story here, but you can also tie in your own corporate data sources if you've got a data warehouse or SQL databases, things like that you want to pull data in from, and even external services. So if there's demographic data or SaaS solutions that you want to pull in as part of that, there's a lot of rich content through that. You basically design your reports in Excel, although they've also launched a new Power BI Designer, which provides the ability to do that report design as well, and you publish them up to the web from there. Microsoft has a site dedicated just to Power BI. Let me flip over to that for a second here. So if you want to explore more, as I mentioned, the deck will be up, the links will be in there. It's really about bringing your data to life, and it's very cool and very interesting. Not only the dashboards like we see here, but things like Q&A, where you can actually do questions and answers against your data. So you can actually phrase an English question through machine intelligence. Power BI will actually formulate what it feels is an appropriate graph or visualization for that data, and it becomes an interactive conversation against that data. So it's much, much richer than traditional canned reports would ever be from a data analysis point of view. You can start digging down through different scenarios and what ifs and exploring your data through there. Next up, we've got the Office Graph. So Office Graph, sorry, this is a bit incorrect. It's not actually the presentation layer. It's the underlying signals capture, where basically the graph is capturing all of the user activity. So as you receive an email, as you get booked in a meeting, as you open a document in SharePoint Online, basically all the actions that you're taking in Office 365, the Office Graph is capturing that through signals. And basically it surfaces that up through an API. And the main way that's getting surfaced is through Delve, which is a new part of Office 365 that Microsoft has just released in the past 6 months or so. So it's powered by the Office Graph, which collects those signals of activities, and it's really about driving information discovery. So if you think about how do you find knowledge within your organization? Yes, you can use search, say in the Exchange Online to search your inbox. You can use the SharePoint search to search what's stored in the corporate repository and in your OneDrive. But often people resort back to people. A lot of the knowledge in an organization isn't actually in people's heads. And Delve is really about exposing those connections between information and knowledge and people. Let me actually come over to our Delve site here. Flip back over and in there. And what it does is it allows you to pick a person and understand what they're working on with relation to what you do. So it's using machine intelligence. I've actually pulled up, I'm logged in as Katie Jordan, which is one of the demo users, and it's showing what Katie's been doing, but I can go to other people. Let's say I want to look at Anne, who is the president of the organization. Maybe I was at a presentation that Anne gave, and I want to find some details on that. So there was an investor meeting sales report here that Anne's got in her OneDrive, but she's exposed it, so it's available to other folks like myself as Katie. So I can see that, drill down into that. So rather than reaching out to Anne, sending her an email saying, hey, I'd love to see that deck from the meeting that you did yesterday. Can you send me the link to it, or can you email me an attachment with the deck? I can go straight to Anne's Delve site and drive into that. Now, at first glance, it may feel a little creepy that, hey, you're exposing everything that this person is doing and surfacing up to other people in the organization. Microsoft's being very careful, first and foremost, from a permissions point of view, to say, well, if I, as Katie, don't have access to Anne's OneDrive to see that meeting sales report, I wouldn't even see it in her Delve page. So it's only going to surface things that I'm allowed to see It's also going to use machine intelligence to determine, well, what are the most relevant things? Maybe I was at that meeting, and Delve would actually understand that connection, would surface that piece of content up higher because it was related to that. So it's looking at all those connections and those social interactions and driving that through from there. It's also providing a profile page. So one of the things that Microsoft found is that while SharePoint has had profile pages in there many, many versions back, people often didn't populate those well. So what Delve is doing is it's reaching into as many different places as it can to build out that profile programmatically for people. So rather than relying on them to manually maintain and update the profile themselves, again, using the machine intelligence to build that out. It's a little bit about and contact information, past projects, skills, schools, etc., pulling that in. Now, it's not to say that Anne can't update and manage that herself as well if she chooses to, but if not, Delve will do its best efforts to drive that through from there. And displaying out the organizational chart to say, okay, how does Anne fit into the organization? Well, she's the president. We've got folks reporting up to her, and I can start to navigate in through the organization, see different people, understand their relationships, and then flip back to their activities and say, okay, Julian, yeah, that's the person that was in the meeting. I couldn't remember their name. Okay, now I found them, and I'm looking for that legal brief that they were working on. So it really facilitates that discovery of information. So I see this as huge. It will be coming on-premise. So there is, as part of SharePoint 2016, a Delve connector, which will provide the signals for your on-premise SharePoint. But Delve as an entity will still be running in the cloud. So you'll still need to be using Office 365, even if you're crawling that content that's on-premise in order to get the Delve experience. So again, back to that hybrid scenario, it will surface up not only signals that are happening in the cloud, but signals that are happening in your on-premise system as well. Office groups. This is an interesting concept that's come out in the last 6 months or so as well. It's the idea of blending features from both Exchange and SharePoint together. So, okay, well, we've got a group that's working together. Maybe it's from a project point of view. Maybe it's from a cross-functional team point of view. And they need a place to organize their work. And SharePoint team sites historically have been a good place to put that from a document management point of view, but how do we make it richer than that? And that's really what Office groups are about. They blend in that SharePoint team site features with Exchange features like group calendar and mailbox. When I create an Office 365 group, that group gets a calendar as part of it. And it's not a SharePoint calendar, it's actually an Exchange calendar, which means it integrates well into your Outlook. It can be invited to meetings just like any other resource in Outlook. And there's a mailbox there as well, so you can send email to the group, which then surfaces up in the group site. So maybe if you want to CC the group on all group conversations that are going back and forth, you can do that through that as well. So it's really a powerful way to bring a group of people together into a collaboration space through there. And obviously Delve surfaces that up to show the activities and the signals within that group as well. I'm going to do a quick time check here, so we've got about 15 minutes, make sure we're getting through everything we want to get through here. Office 365 video. This is the first of the new portals that Microsoft is launching as part of Office 365. So they're creating sort of purpose-built portals for specific functionality. They've announced a knowledge management and an Infopedia portal as part of Ignite, but those are still being worked through in terms of exactly what they are. Office 365 video was actually launched at last year's SharePoint conference, is now fully rolled out as part of the 365 suite. And the idea is that video is becoming a very strong way to communicate within an organization, but there's still barriers to that. It's still difficult to create and distribute those videos. So Office 365 video is really about reducing those barriers. Say, okay, we can create channels, think of it like a YouTube channel, except it's a corporate channel within your intranet where people can search and browse and find corporate videos. So that's sort of the consumption side of it, but how do we create those videos? So you use whatever tool you would do, maybe to do a desktop recording like we're doing for this session here today, but then you need to get that in the proper format and figure out where you're going to publish it to make it available for people. This really simplifies that. You literally just drag and drop your video in whatever format it is into the video portal, and Office 365 uses Azure Media Services, which is the same tools that Microsoft used to stream things like the Olympics to hundreds of millions of people. So it's massively scalable video architecture, and it transcodes that, which means it converts that into a format that's friendly for the web. You tag it with your metadata, and then it shows up in the appropriate channels from there. So it's very easy to create, publish, and consume the video through that video portal. OneNote, I mentioned at the beginning, electronic notebook on steroids. If you're not using it, strongly encourage you to. It's free. It's something that you can use personally. I've been using OneNote for quite a few years now. I keep all of my personal notes in there. But we also have shared OneNote. So we have a management OneNote. We have project OneNotes. Even things like Office 365 groups, part of what it creates there is a shared OneNote that you can use for that. You can then have your OneNote client installed on your mobile device, on your desktop, what have you, and it will sync and provide offline access to all that note information. So if you're on the fly, you need to check notes, update notes, you can go ahead and do that, and then as soon as you connect back up again, it'll sync back up into either your personal OneNote or that shared OneNote. The same co-creation, co-authoring experience in Word and Excel and PowerPoint that I was describing apply to OneNote as well. So if you've got a team OneNote, maybe you're in a meeting, you may have 3 or 4 people with that OneNote open on their tablets around the table. They can actually be all making notes in there, and everybody sees those changes live as they're being done. Version control, Yammer integration, auditing, reporting, even things like data loss prevention and e-discovery. If you need to have controls around what sort of information is being shared, this applies not just to OneNote, but to Outlook, to the full suite of products, where you can actually define policies and rules around what type of information should be flagged and maybe shouldn't be shared externally or with certain people in the organization, or even stored in there in the first place, things like credit card numbers from a PCI point of view, or health card numbers from a PHI perspective. From a developer point of view, I'm not going to go too deep into this, but there is a rich API around Office 365 as well. I mean, we have a development team. We often build out customizations around Office 365, and they're really simplifying that experience. In the past, there's been a lot of different ways to access in. A simple unified REST API is where they're going from that. And even across the product stack between the consumer and the commercial experiences, they're doing a good job of providing a unified experience across that. So there's things like Outlook.com, which is the consumer version of the Exchange Online, the OneDrive, which is the personal versus OneDrive for business. Those are being consolidated, so as you build add-ons, they work equally well in both the consumer and the business versions of them. Also add-ins for other platforms. They're getting standardized on an HTML, JavaScript, so more of an open standard, industry standard way of doing them. And those add-ons then work both in the rich client and in the Office Online and in the iOS and Android devices. So it's really a write once, use in many places type of approach through here, which is great from a developer's point of view. You don't want to have to support lots of different platforms in lots of different ways. Okay, I want to switch gears now and talk about Office 365 security. This is a question we get asked quite often, which is how safe is our data in the cloud? So let's start first with, well, how do you authenticate to Office 365? What's your way of accessing the cloud? Well, the first way is what I used when I was bringing up that demo account. It's called a cloud identity. Basically, there's an Azure Active Directory behind every Office 365 tenant. And basically, it's a cloud version of Active Directory, and it has all of the user accounts in there and all the subscriptions and what people are licensed to do in there. So there's no integration to on-premises. Basically, you open up a browser and you create those online identities, assign passwords to them, communicate those out to the users, and they go ahead and use them from there. So it's very quick and easy to get going. It's ideal from a proof of concept, or maybe you're a small organization, you've only got half a dozen people or so, and you're not running on-premises Active Directory, then this makes a lot of sense. However, if you are a medium or enterprise, likely you're running Active Directory as your on-premises authentication, and you want to connect into that. So the first way of doing that is called DirSync, and what this does is you still got those Azure Active Directory identities for all of your staff, but rather than you manually create them, you run a scheduled job on your on-premise server called DirSync, and what it does is it takes your on-premise identities and it pushes them up into Azure Active Directory, so you don't have to create all those. And even things like reporting relationships and the org structure and people's pictures and profile information, whatever you've got in your Active Directory, a lot of that will get pushed up into the Azure Active Directory and ultimately into Office 365. Now, if you want to, you can also do a password sync up into Azure Active Directory. People see that and they get very worried and they say, I don't want my on-premises Active Directory up in the cloud with Microsoft, that sounds like a big security risk. It's not actually syncing your password per se. It's syncing a password hash, which basically can only be used to compare against what somebody's typed in to see if they've typed in your password correctly. So you can't reverse that and say, well, what is their password, so I can now hack into their on-premises account. So it is still secure from that point. And the third and the preferred option for anything more than a smaller organization, though, is to do a full federated identity. And this is where you still use DirSync to push the identity up into Azure Active Directory, but you don't push the password sync up into there. And you don't authenticate against that Azure Active Directory. What happens is when somebody hits Office 365, you get to that login page, it redirects to your on-premises, your Active Directory Federation services, and you log in with your AD credentials there. If that's all set up properly, that's all transparent to your on-premises users. They'll go to the SharePoint Online site, say, if they're not logged in, it'll redirect to ADSS. It knows who they are because they're already logged into their main computer. In they go, and they're now in SharePoint Online. They never saw a login prompt through that whole process. And that's really the ideal. The middle scenario, while it's a single password, it's not single sign-on. You do have to log in again to your computer and then again into Office 365. The second one, once you've logged into your computer and it's a domain computer, you can go straight into Office 365. So it's a better user experience. It's also more secure from that point of view that the authentication is happening against your on-premises AD. If you shut that AD down, you're not waiting for a DirSync to happen to deactivate that user in the cloud. Because their on-premises account is deactivated, they're immediately shut out of both on-premise and Office 365. Microsoft takes security very, very seriously. So they have a whole site dedicated to it called the Office 365 Trust Center. And there's a tremendous amount of content up on there. The link is there for you that will walk you through all the different security features through there. I won't go through all those in detail, but I do have some highlights that I want to talk about. So the first is Microsoft's very clear that the customer owns the data. They don't troll the data. They don't have access to the data. They're not going to start targeting advertising based on what your email content or your documents have in you like some other cloud providers. They're very, very clear that there's a Chinese wall up there and their engineering staff don't have access to your data. In fact, if you create a support request saying I need assistance, something not working properly in SharePoint or in my email, in my Exchange, there's a customer lockbox feature. There's basically an approval process that says, okay, for the next 2 hours, the customer is approving that a support engineer has access to their data in this particular area in order to facilitate this support request. There's a very clear audit trail around that. That's been happening for some time now internally, but coming soon, they'll actually make the approval process include the customer themselves. So somebody opens a support case, somebody in IT or security gets a notification saying the support request is being processed and the engineer needs access to the data, you need to approve that before that happens. So very tight controls around access to your data. There's also an Office 365 management activity API that's coming out that provides full audit information on how the organization is using Office 365. You know, who's doing what, where's that data, whether it's in SharePoint, Exchange Online, Azure Active Directory, what has been activity around the customer lockbox and such on there. So providing not only the controls, but the transparency around them. Just to compare that a little bit from an on-premise versus Office 365, because people often say, well, I feel that my data is more secure in my own organization, physically in my office. I feel safe with that. It doesn't take long, though, to look down through this list and say, well, how much of this are you actually doing on-premise? Physical data access being the easiest way to hack into people. You know, is there servers under people's desks? Are they in a server room? Is that room locked? Is there keycard access and audit over who goes into that room? Biometric readers, motion sensors, video camera surveillance. Odds are in most organizations, unless you're a big 5 bank, you're probably not doing all these things in your data center. You are if you're with Office 365, though. So you're really taking up a level by putting your data into Office 365. Do you ever audit what you do within your organization? You know, Microsoft is basically under a continuous audit because they have, you know, between ISO, European healthcare audits and such, it's just a rolling audit of different third-party auditors coming in to review their security. So there's always that external validation. There's logging in what's going on. There's multiple copies of the data being maintained. So if you lose one of the disks that your data is stored on, there's 2 other copies that's stored in. You can actually geo-replicate that to another data center to another 3 disks as well. Microsoft takes backups every 12 hours. They store those for 2 weeks. And data is encrypted throughout the whole process. So it's on rest in physical disks. Whenever it's in transit between Microsoft data centers, like that geo-replication, that's encrypted. And obviously, whenever you consume it, you're consuming it over an HTTPS encrypted protocol as well. Even from a search and seizure point of view, people say, well, NSA or CSIS could access my data in the Microsoft cloud. It's actually harder for them to do that than it is against on-premises. So I had some discussions with local law enforcement around what are the search and seizure rights, both from an on-premise and from a cloud point of view. I mean, if you have the unfortunate circumstance that you've got a rogue employee who does something illegal and keeps some of that information on your corporate servers, you could find yourself facing a warrant for the search and seizure of those servers. And they may physically seize those computers. I mean, the reality is, I talked to a couple of different local police forces. They try and work with the business. If the business is not the one who's breaking the law, it's just an employee who has, they'll try and take the data from the computers in place and mitigate the impact on the business. But if it's a severe case, they may still be seizing those servers, and you've lost access to that data, not just the illegal, but the legal information that's on there as well that you're using to run your business. So that can have a major disruption to your business. In the cloud, government doesn't have physical access. They can't show up at the Microsoft data center with a warrant and say, I want to pull these disks out. It's a multi-tenant environment. There's no clear way to say this customer's data lives on this disk. So they have to request access to that data. And because Microsoft says they don't own the data, they're just the keeper of the data, they actively resist those requests. They defer those back to the customer. And ultimately, that data access is governed by the law of where the data rests. So that's been a concern, that there hasn't been a Canadian data center. If you're keeping the data in the US, then it's actually US law that governs the access to that. So that's obviously been a barrier to a lot of organizations in terms of moving into Office 365. But last week, Kevin Turner, who's the Chief Operating Officer of Microsoft Worldwide, was up in Toronto. Big announcement. They're opening Toronto and Quebec City data centers. The Azure portion of that is going to be coming online early in calendar year 2016, and then 365 and Dynamics CRM is going to be following later on in the year. So we're probably about 12 months away from seeing full Office 365 in a Canadian cloud. Full press release up there at the reimagined.microsoft.ca that talks about that announcement and what that means for Canadian customers. Okay, last topic. We've only got a couple minutes left here. Onboarding. So you want to start with Office 365. You're not working with it today. What does that look like? Well, there's free trials, so it's very easy to sign up for a trial, either as an empty tenant, or you can actually create a demo trial just like I did, and it'll populate it with users and data and content, so you can explore and play with that. You have to decide which workloads you're going to start with, though. Are you planning to do an Exchange migration first? Do you want to do SharePoint first? Maybe you want to bring up Skype for Business because you don't have instant messaging within your organization. You have to think about how the authentication is going to work. Both, at the trial point of view, you may just do cloud identity, but as you think about rolling that out, are we going to do an ADFS implementation? Are we just going to do the DIRSync with the password sync? Depends on your organization. So there's some architecture and migration planning work that needs to happen. We can certainly assist with that work. Key, though, is to also think about change management. You're going to be moving people's mailboxes or their SharePoint sites or their file shares. How do you manage that change? What's the communications and the training that goes with that to make sure that that's successful? And again, we can help with those too. So a couple of the upcoming sessions. The session next week is actually all about the architecture side from a SharePoint Online point of view. So if you're planning on moving from an on-premises SharePoint or building a net new online corporate intranet or team sites, what have you, what are the steps you should follow in terms of building out that information architecture? And then if you're moving from an existing, what's the migration looking like that? We've got a number of options from a manual process through to using third-party tools. We're going to be focusing on the ShareGate tool, which is a great tool both from an end-user management point of view, but also for doing these larger migration tasks. So that's going to be next week, June 16th, in the morning from 10:30 to 11:30. And then the week after, we're going to be doing a session on experience, branding, and navigation. So this is all around the user experience side of it. As I mentioned, how do you brand within the boundaries so that you don't risk breaking Office 365 as things change within it, but still have your corporate brand and colors and look and feel and consistent navigation across all of that. So if you go up to our envisionit.com/services-events site, you'll see all the details and information on that. The Q&A has been open through the session. I'm not sure if the team has been answering that. If you guys want to jump on the line, if anything specific people want to ask from there, and then we'll wrap it up from there.
There have been a few questions that have been asked, have been answered privately. So if you have come up, a few questions around the video portal. The video portal in terms of size, just share the question that came out there. It's around any limits, and as far as I know, there are no limits of how much you can upload there, except for a single file. One video has a limit of 2 gigabytes, and that amount that you are uploading does go to your overall quota, not just for video, but really your overall quota for Office 365.
That's right, yes. Okay. Well, if there aren't further questions, I want to thank everybody for joining us this afternoon. Hope you get a chance to tune in to our sessions next week and the week after, and if we can assist you in any way in terms of planning your migration to Office 365, we'd love to have that conversation with you. Thanks and have a great day.